Have you ever wondered what it's like to fly a seaplane? Well, I have. And at AirVenture 2019 I went over to the EAA Seaplane base to see for myself what it's all about. A short bus ride from the main show takes us to the Seaplane base. My first impression, this is a relaxing place. Fewer people, less noise, and shade make this a welcome change from the AirVenture routine. I had planned to meet Steve McCaughey here. Steve flies a Piper Carbon floats. He's also the president of the Seaplane Pilots Association, or short SPA. Before this summer, I had never been in a seaplane, and we'll go fly in one today. But first, Steve gives us a tour of the seaplane base.
Here we are.
Here we are. It's Oshkosh 2019. We're at the Seaplane base here with Steve McCaughey, the president of the Seaplane Pilots Association of America. And we're here to get an overview of what seaplane flying is all about, and then take a look around the base here and see what seaplane flying at Oshkosh is all about.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you here. This is one of my favorite places in the world, here at the Oshkosh Seaplane base. It's a little bit of a departure from the big show on the other side here.
It does look a lot more relaxed than over there.
Some shade trees, which you don't have out at the field.
Right.
Some water that you don't have out at the field, and a lot of beautiful airplanes. So, well, why don't we take a walk around and talk about seaplanes and
Sounds good.
kind of expose people to our world.
Excellent. Let's take a walk.
So we've got our big event tent here at the Seaplane base. This is where all the activities take place. We've got safety seminars, and then generally at night there's big social activities. So a good mix of education and parties. Good times.
Every night throughout the week.
Every night throughout the week, yeah. And you can see, you know, unlike the main air show, and this is really unique to air shows, to have a place here where people can come and sit and enjoy lunch and watch airplanes fly on the water. And we'll walk out here, take a look at this J3. So more people have learned how to fly seaplanes in a J3 Cub like this than any other airplane in the world. Really? And so it's a great trainer. Most of these airplanes go back to the early 40s. And 85 horsepower to 100 horsepower. And they are a great trainer.
What makes them so great? Is it the handling characteristics, the low price, or...
Well, it is low price because it's very simple and it doesn't burn a lot of fuel. What we like about the J3 Cub, you know, there's no artificial horizon, no radios in most cases, so it allows you to focus purely on what you need to do to fly the seaplane.
Okay. Now, I know the land version of the J3 Cub is a tailwheel airplane.
Yes.
And tailwheel airplanes are a little different to fly and handle than tricycle gear. Is there any difference that's equivalent to that for a seaplane?
No, you know, the float planes and the flying hulls will fly differently, but all the float planes fly pretty much the same. It's just a matter of the horsepower, the size, the weight, and then, of course, the water conditions. But universally, if you know how to fly one float plane, you're fairly well equipped to transition into another float plane.
How many seaplanes do you have here on a typical day during Oshkosh?
It varies between 80 and 120. So one of the largest gathering of seaplanes you'll ever see in one spot. So this is out on what we call the point. Over here we have the Whip Air display. They're the largest float manufacturer in the world. So straight and amphibious floats, and they make the floats for the Fire Bomber, the Cessna Caravan, and all the way down to an airplane like mine. My Super Cub has amphibious Whip Air 2100s.
Now that's an interesting looking one there, the yellow one. It's a twin engine, but very small.
Yeah, let's take a look at this.
What is that one?
Unique float and unique aircraft. So this is the Lockwood AirCam. This airplane was originally designed for National Geographic as a film platform.
Okay.
And so it was intended to be a one-off airplane. And the very first airplane is hanging up right here at AirVenture in the EAA Museum. So everything is redundant. They wanted to make the airplane very, very safe for National Geographic to go film. And so what they did with this airplane is there are 2 engines, 2 electrical systems, 2 fuel systems. Everything is redundant on the airplane. It is incredibly well balanced. extremely high performance from a takeoff and landing and climb scenario. And the biggest reason, what they wanted to achieve with this airplane was that single engine performance. If there was an engine failure, they wanted the airplane to be able to safely get the camera crew home safely. And so this, unique to this airplane, it'll take off of water or land and climb out on a single engine. That's very, very unusual for a multi-engine airplane.
Yes.
To be able to physically take off
with one
and
engine.
Climb out on one engine.
In fact, I couldn't name another one that is certified to do that.
No, I don't know of any either. And normal takeoff on this airplane, land or water, 3.5 seconds. On less than 5 gallons of fuel an hour.
And it looks like you can have some fun here. You're out in the open, you feel the wind, you can smell what's outside.
It's incredible. So we call it the magic carpet ride.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite airplanes. Everything above your waist is outside, and it is an incredible airplane. So there's about 200 of these flying.
Okay.
So look at this here. We've got this wonderful chair here that they made at the Seaplane base to get everyone's attention and let people have a photo moment. Okay, so want to continue to walk.
Continue to walk. And tell us a little bit about how a pilot that has, say, single engine land privileges, what can I expect if I make the step to fly seaplanes?
So the transition process from land pilot to seaplane pilot is fairly easy. There are about 100 schools in the United States. So most states in the United States have a seaplane school, and a wide variety of equipment from the J3 Cub, Progressive Aerodyne Sea Ray, Cessna 185s, de Havilland Beavers. So if there's an airplane you like that you want to do the rating in, you can usually find one to do it in. Okay. 3 to 5 days in most cases for most pilot. That depends on their stick and rudder skills a little bit. And entry level on the ratings probably starts around $1,650. Okay. So very inexpensive by traditional standards. Okay. For us pilots in the U.S., it does count as a BFR, a biannual flight review. And if you're a ratings collector like myself, it's a very inexpensive rating and absolutely the most enjoyable rating you'll ever do. There's no written exam, only an oral test and a practical test.
Okay. And what can I expect is going to be the most challenging thing to learn? What do pilots that transition struggle with typically?
Well, you know, pilots are actually used to coming in on a glide slope, and we typically fly a little bit lower as seaplane pilots, so there's a little bit of a transition there. But also pilots that don't have really good stick and rudder skills, we see them having to reacclimate themselves with using the rudders and the stick and rudder coordination. But the single hardest thing that we probably teach is the glassy water landing, which is essentially very similar to an instrument approach.
And that's hard because you don't know exactly, you can't see exactly how close you are to the water.
That is correct, yeah. So you come over the shoreline at the lowest point possible. So if we were coming over these trees, we would literally drag the floats through the top of the trees and set what we call the last visual reference point. And it's pitch and power, and once that's set, you just fly to the water. And you don't even look at the water because you'll get disoriented.
Just wait for the splash.
You wait for the touchdown.
Yeah. Okay.
So very important. But this is the point out here at the Seaplane base. Actually, you can see quite a few of the aircraft have departed because it's Saturday afternoon. And we call Saturday kind of the spectator day for the non-pilots.
Yes.
And so a lot of times we'll have the pilots depart earlier in the week, Friday or Saturday. But you can still see, you know, there's a couple dozen aircraft out here. And Cessna 182, Cessna 185, we've got a 172, a couple 172s out here, a Maul, the Cessna Caravan, there's a 206 over here, so a nice variety of aircraft. AirCam over there with an enclosure, that's unusual. And this is, so they come in and they'll come over here to the boat docks. They'll be able to unload their passengers and all their gear for the week. And then they have boats that'll take them out to their mooring.
Okay, so the pilot would typically go out on a boat and pick up the passengers at the dock? Or?
The pilot will be taken out. What they generally do is they'll go out with the pilot to the boat and hook it up to a lanyard and drag the airplane back to the dock from them to load. And they can do fueling over there as well.
Yeah.
And then we have a kind of a control area over here. We'll have volunteers out here that will both operate in a air traffic control capacity, but they'll also act as water controllers, controlling the traffic on the water. So basically the pilots will have to get cleared to go out the point. They'll make sure there's not any incoming aircrafts coming in through this little pinch here, and then they'll generally advise the pilots of the wave conditions and the wind conditions and things like that. Monitor the weather. But what a beautiful setting. Really beautiful place.
That little person over there must be a story behind it.
There's a story. So that's Whip Air's display over there. So that's their logo. So the company's name is Whip Air, and those are the guys we saw over there, the largest float company in the world. And their mascot or their logo is a guy with a whip. And so that is supposed to be emulating the guy, and I don't know where his whip went. It's missing, but usually there's a whip in his hand.
So then I assume you would taxi out here into the lake for takeoff. Do you take off into the wind, or are the waves more important, or are wind and waves always aligned?
Yeah, generally in a lake like this, you don't have current, so wind and waves will be aligned. And so we'll always try to take off and land into the wind. Sometimes we can take advantage of shoreline cover, and you can do a crosswind landing and use the shoreline as a windbreak to get smoother water. The only problem is it's generally rougher air in that area as well. So, but yeah, wonderful experience, and again, probably one of the easier ways to fly into AirVenture as well, because you're not dealing with the other 10,000 airplanes that are coming into the main field.
Steve, say I have my seaplane rating and I'm the lucky owner of a seaplane, or I have access to one. Where can I legally fly in this seaplane?
Well, that's a great question, and one of the main reasons to become a member of the Seaplane Pilots Association. So we publish a water landing directory in an app form, and it helps keep the members informed of where you can and cannot land. You can look it up by state, the distance from you, open, closed, open with restrictions. And it's really necessary to have an app like this because there is no continuity between the states. Some states are very open and unregulated, where we have, in Florida where I live, in my county I have 800 lakes, and approximately 780 of those lakes are open.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Then you go to a state like Colorado, and there's 2 lakes open in the entire state. And we've had to fight very aggressively to get those lakes open. So it varies greatly from state to state. And one of the values we deliver from the Seaplane Pilots Association is providing pilots with that database with the water landing directory.
Once I land, can I stay overnight if I find a nice place? Can I park there, or is that also different from location to location?
In most states where they're seaplane friendly, and what we find is where seaplanes are commonplace, where people are used to seeing seaplanes, there's generally no pushback. They enjoy seeing them. But where they're not used to seeing seaplanes, that's where we typically have more questions about whether it's legal to be there or not. But we fly across the country and carry a tent and pull up on shorelines across the United States. And we'll pull up, find a quiet place away from all the hustle and bustle, and generally no one bothers us.
See, the way I imagine it is it's like a boat, only it's faster. It gets me to all the places that otherwise only a boat could get to, but I wouldn't have the patience for boating. I need something faster.
Well, you need a little patience with seaplanes because we're not known for our speed. The AirCam back here behind us, typically in the AirCam we're flying at 65 knots. That's our optimum speed. They're not that fast.
Still faster than a boat.
Still faster
and you
than
can
a
hop
boat.
from one lake to the other.
Yes. But it is one of the great things, the freedom. From most major metropolises, in 10 or 15 minutes we can be in lakes that most people don't have access to. So even if you're in the heart of a major city, generally there's water not that far away that we can get by seaplane that most people don't, they're not able to access. And my wife and I and several of our members will fly out and do lunch flyouts on Saturday. We'll go to lunch by seaplane. We'll go to dinner by seaplane and Sunday brunch. So we have a resort that we love to go to for Sunday brunch, and we just pull up on the beach.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite or a couple of favorite spots from trips that you made that particularly stick out, that you say, that will be a great experience to go to again?
There's so many. Alaska, you can never go wrong in Alaska flying seaplanes. But I've flown seaplanes in Australia. We took 35 of our members to Lake Como, Italy, and had an amazing time going out to, we would literally fly out to villas and have lunch looking at Bellagio across the lake. I actually got married in a Grumman Albatross in flight.
Oh, really?
So that's a memorable one.
It should be, yeah.
So we took off out of Lake Mead in Nevada, flew over the Hoover Dam, and accomplished the wedding ceremony in flight over the Grand Canyon.
Oh, that's quite a story.
So I have to tell that one. That's mandatory.
Yeah.
But we've had a lot of wonderful experiences.
Okay. What are some of the things that a seaplane pilot with a fresh seaplane rating might still need some time and practice to?
Well, I used to say if you don't own a seaplane, you probably don't fly one enough to be safe. But we do have some rental operators coming about right now. Flying Fish, who's here at the show, actually has a seaplane rental program. You can go do your seaplane rating with them and do some additional time, and they'll check you out where you're able to rent a seaplane from them. But the first couple of 100 hours are all about learning, and quite honestly, you never stop learning. Every landing we do, every takeoff we do is completely different. The water conditions are different, the wind conditions, the docking situation or the beaching situation is always different. And that's one of the things that's really refreshing. It's a very mentally stimulating activity because everything is fresh. It's a wonderful exercise in developing your skills. Every time you fly, you're going to have to use a new skill set.
Not something that gets routine quickly.
No, we're not flying on autopilot like those darn airline pilots.
Yeah. Or me most of the time.
We just have to throw that in there because, honestly, we've got a lot of airline pilots and some of our most passionate members, but what they enjoy is they go to work and fly, but they can't wait to get home and go fly their seaplanes. So it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I understand. So, Steve, flying is a small community, it's a small world, right? We run into the same people every year. We travel to fly-ins. I imagine seaplane flying must be an even smaller community.
It is. I like putting things in context so people get an idea of just how small the seaplane community is. And of course, in Europe, it's even much smaller than it is here. But there are 350 million Americans, United States citizens. And out of that number, 11.8 million own recreational power boats. There are 600,000 general aviation and professional pilots. But you drill that down further, there's only 26,000 rated seaplane pilots, and only about 8,000 to 10,000 of those are actually active. And so if you take a football stadium with 72,000 people in it, statistically, if I'm in the stadium, there's only one other active seaplane pilot. That kind of puts it in perspective.
That's a good way to picture that.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of one of these massive football stadiums, it's a small club.
And 6,000 to 8,000 nationwide. Any idea how many of them have come to Oshkosh this year?
We were just talking about that. I think that there may be as many as 3,000 here. So we had 750 at our event the other night just for our event. So
that's between a third and half of the seaplane population, the active seaplane population of the country,
are in one spot this week.
One spot right
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's quite the event.
Yeah. So the thing that really amazes me about that, though, so at 3 to 5% of the pilot population being seaplane rated, we have so much fun. We work on our pilot skills. We enjoy this amazing lifestyle as seaplane pilots where we can fly and go places and do things that other pilots can't do. And I'm always just amazed and frustrated with the fact that it's only 3 to 5% of pilots. Why I don't understand why more pilots aren't doing this.
Well, let's try to get the word
We're
out.
working on that.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, in preparation for Oshkosh, I talked to a number of people to find out, besides the air show and the exhibits, what are the fun things that happen on the side of Oshkosh? And several people told me the one thing I must go to is the SPA cornrows. It seems to be the social event every year.
Thank
in
you.
Oshkosh.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. So live music and lots of beer and brats and roasted corn and just 750, 800 people having a tremendously good time. So this year was our 40th anniversary for the event, so it was a big year for us. And it was our founder's 80th birthday as well, the night of the event, so that made it extra special.
Excellent.
So what do you think about this airplane we're standing on?
So I know a Cessna 182. I've flown it, of course, on wheels, not on floats. But I'm sensing there's something special. IO 580, that's a bigger engine than the one that I flew.
So this is the Boss 182. It is a conversion that is done in Minnesota by Whip Air. And they put this massive IO 580, 340 horsepower, into what they call the Boss 182. And this is kind of a hot rod. So it's faster than most of our seaplanes. It has the Cessna 185 wing essentially, so it's a great heavy hauler. And they put beautiful leather interiors in them and make them like almost like a corporate airplane.
Nice.
But this airplane is really for someone that wants to go great distances, might have the financial ability to afford an airplane like this. But this is one of the most exciting airplanes we have right now.
Let's talk about affordability. I have an idea of what it costs to rent or own a small piston engine land airplane. For seaplane flying, what should I expect for cost of ownership or rental where available?
Yeah, well, I actually used to brag. I bought a very inexpensive seaplane, as I have a land airplane. My first land airplane was a Cessna 120. I bought it in 1997 for $14,500 as a certified airplane in great flying condition. And I always say that that's kind of one of the secrets out there, is you don't have to spend. If you look at a lot of the LSAs on the market, we're seeing the LSA seaplanes and regular airplanes running from, on the very low end, $120,000 to over $400,000. And you can buy an airplane like the Cessna 120 that's a certified airplane today for under $25,000. So my first seaplane was the Cessna 140 on floats. I paid $25,000 for that. And I currently fly a Super Cub on amphibious floats. I kind of stole it. I got it at a very good deal at $130,000, but generally between $160,000 and $180,000.
Okay.
You have the lake amphibians starting around $45,000 and going up into a couple $100,000 depending on the model. And then you get into something like this at $600,000 to $700,000, and the Caravan at a couple of million. So big price spread, but you can do it affordably as well.
I guess that's no secret in aviation. If you want to spend more money on it, there's something out there to allow you to do that.
Yeah, the big point is, though, is I think it can be done a lot more affordably if you're motivated. If you're motivated to do it bad enough, you can find a good airplane at a realistic price.
Are there a lot of home builders in the seaplane community?
Yeah, we're seeing more and more. The LSA world is very healthy. The AirCam that we were with earlier is an experimental home-built airplane. Okay. So that is a kit airplane. You only can buy it as a kit. The Sea Ray can be bought as a kit, and the AirVenture. So there are several airplanes out there in the kit category. Very popular.
Nice. Steve, I heard seaplanes have a big place in aviation history. How did all this get started, and how did we get from there to where we are today?
Well, you know, it's really a pretty amazing story, because Glenn Curtis worked on developing the STEP in Hammondsport, New York in 1911, and the STEP was what really allowed us to fly seaplanes, to accelerate fast enough to get off the water and break the suction. But I don't think most people realize that the very first commercial airline flight, scheduled passenger service, was a seaplane.
Is that right?
It was Tony Janis, January 1st, 1914. And he did a 22-minute flight from St. Petersburg, Florida to Tampa, Florida. Oh. And It's fascinating. I never want to hear anyone complain about the cost of airline tickets, because in 1914, for the 22-minute flight, the first passenger paid $500 in 1914 dollars.
That's a lot of money in today's currency.
You could almost buy a Model T Ford for that.
Yeah.
So, that was one of the beginning. And so I don't know if people realize that seaplanes were really the impetus and the beginning of the entire air traffic transportation system. But you look at it further, Boeing's first airplane was a seaplane that they manufactured in Seattle. So again, Boeing with deep roots, their first airplane was a seaplane. Then they went on to manufacture the Boeing 314 that was famous as the Pan Am Clipper ship that they flew. And again, the romance and the kind of the height of the romantic period of aviation. Igor Sikorsky, that invented the helicopter, also was very prolific making seaplanes. He made several seaplanes before the technology advanced to the point that he could make the helicopter a reality. And then again, carrying on with this airline theme, the safest airline in history just happened to be the longest continuous operating airline in history, and that's Chalk's. And Chalk's flew from 1927 to 2005 and never had a passenger fatality. And I don't think that'll ever be exceeded. The safety record there will never be exceeded. Unfortunately, the very first fatality was a spar failure due to corrosion, and the company was pretty weak at the point and put them out of business. But I don't think that safety record will ever be topped.
That's pretty amazing. And now I understand better all the, shall we say, nautical heritage that we have.
Yes.
Why do we
the captains and the bars and everything else.
Uniforms.
If you look at the captain's bars on airline pilots, that comes from the nautical side of when seaplanes were developing out of the marine side.
Do you think the origin has something to do with the fact that runway infrastructure, airport infrastructure was very sparse at the beginning and while water was available, or did it come out of necessity that way, or how did it start as a seaplane, not a land plane?
Well, that was it. It was access to runways. So unfortunately, World War II led to the demise of commercial seaplane service because during World War II, we built lots of long runways in remote places for bombers to fly off of. And that was kind of the undoing of the romantic age of the clipper ships that Pan Am was flying. And a lot of even Americans don't understand that Pan Am, when you got on a Pan Am flight, you were going someplace special. Juan Tripp's vision was that he only did international flights to interesting places. So you never flew Pan Am from Miami to Chicago. You flew Pan Am from Miami to Havana. And interestingly enough, again, Charles Lindbergh was the chief pioneer of developing the routes for Pan Am. So again, a lot of interesting players. Just a fascinating history in the way that we've been able to shape aviation history. And again, coming down to that 26,000 pilots, here we've had this massive influence on aviation, and yet it's still such a small group. Hey Mark, didn't you tell me you were in the market for a seaplane? Funny, we should find one here.
It looks beautiful, it is for sale, but let me get my rating first and then we'll go from there.
Well, we'll help you on that.
And then once I get the rating, I guess SPA would be a good place to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to get more information on how to become a seaplane pilot, have any questions about where you can fly or where to go do the training, we can match people up with the best place to train. We're the only organization in the world that has a full-color glossy magazine dedicated to water flying, and we ship that magazine all over the world, and people can also get it in digital format. So if you want to find out more about seaplanes, if anyone has any questions, they can go to seaplanes.org, and they can find out all of our contact information. You can get a hold of myself or my staff, and we'll point you in the right direction and help them on their journey.
Awesome. I'll have to give this a try in the future.
Awesome.
Steve, thank you for the tour today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
To meet you, and all the best.
Okay, well, we look forward to getting you down and getting you up in my Super Cub as well.
Well, we've heard a lot about seaplanes, but enough talking. Let's go fly one.